Jason had to like man the tripod all that time. You probably do the legwork.
Was tired. Up and down those stairs twice.
Oh, you brought the big guns tonight. Great. Any better, I'd beat you. These are my old colleagues from my old sister. Yeah, say something nice about it. Even if you had to laugh. Oh, cash. The only deal in cash. Oh, that's right. That's your farewell. Yeah.
Got a lot of questions all the time. Yeah. Works out perfect.
keeps the attention.
No, yeah.
I get to have my which one? For one of my schools, for my family.
Now, if you sit in that chair, you have water accidents. Well, or maybe it's just if you're Mandy Simpson, you have water accidents. Looks like it's if you're Mandy Simpson, you have water accidents.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to the May 26th meeting of the Board of Education. We will start, as is our custom, with a moment of silence, but before we do, I want to just acknowledge that this has been a very sad time for the board and for the entire JCPS family. Our colleague and Vice Chair Diane Porter, as I think everyone here knows, lost her daughter Danny on Thursday of this past week, suddenly and as a complete surprise. And I think, I think to some degree all of us are still laboring under the shock and sadness of that. So as we take our moment of silence, I would ask that you keep Diane and Danny in your thoughts. Let's have our moment of silence. Okay, thank you. Let's now begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, which tonight will be led by students from DuPont Manual High School. Dr. Lisa Wilner will now read our vision statement.
All JCPS students graduate prepared to reach their full potential and contribute to our society throughout life.
Thank you. Ms. Terry Robinson will now lead us in recognitions and resolutions.
Thank you. Dr. Hargens, Chair David Jones Jr., this evening we begin with the recognition of DuPont Manual High School students Mukhan Venkatna Krishnan, Sanja Raina, Emily Liu, Sasank Vishnu Bahatla, Sumath Chinnareddy, Diya Mathur, and Sophia Corner for winning top honors in the Kentucky Science and Engineering Fair, which won them the honor of the students traveling to the 2015 Intel International Science and Engineering Fair to participate in the world's largest pre-college science competition. At the state fair, the DuPont Manual High School students competed in 17 different categories. The winners in the statewide science competition received special awards and scholarships. Board Chair David Jones Jr., please come forward and extend congratulations to these outstanding students. Joining in the recognition is their teacher, Glenn Swanzig, and Principal Jerry Mays. I would also like to ask the parents and family members of these outstanding students to please stand and be recognized. Next, we have the honor of bestowing recognition upon Maryhurst School and Western Day Treatment for being designated as alternative programs of distinction by the Kentucky Department of Education for their innovative strategies for meeting the needs of students. The selection process for the designation included several components: a written proposal detailing the school's curriculum, instruction, assessment, data analysis, school culture, and leadership, as well as on-site visit by a review team. Board member Stephanie Horn, please come forward to congratulate Michelle Eccles, principal of Maryhurst School, and associate principal Jill Tabor. Please come forward. And I would like to ask at this time, would the teachers and staff members of Maryhurst School please stand to be recognized as well. Board Chair David Jones Jr., please come forward to congratulate Michelle Eccles and head teacher Lori Nodler. And will the staff and teachers and collaborative partners from 7 counties please stand to be recognized as well. Finally, we have the distinguished honor of recognizing Ann Shapiro, a community partner in education, for her outstanding contribution to the Jefferson County Public School District Early Childhood Program. Ann made a substantial monetary donation this year to the Jefferson County Public School District's Early Childhood Program to purchase books for the district's young learners. Ann wants to encourage others to love reading so that they can continue their education, and she believes that as long as one can read, he or she can learn anything. She chose to support JCPS because she feels that everyone, not just one particular ethnic group, deserves the chance to learn. Board Chair David Jones Jr. and Dr. Hargens, would you please come forward to congratulate Ms. Shapiro for her generous contribution to the Jefferson County Public School District. Her daughter, Marion Ostroff, is here with us tonight as well. Thank you. Dr. Hargens and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, that concludes our recognitions for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to receive the recognitions? So moved by Mr. Brady. Is there a second? Mr. Hadaway, all in favor, aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, it is now time to dismiss anyone who needs to go home and do homework or that sort of thing. So our special guests, thank you for being here with us this evening. Let's move on now to approve the minutes of previous meetings, and I just want to call everybody's attention to the fact that revised minutes were distributed earlier today, posted on the website. There were no substantive changes. I believe just a couple of things that we did were added or were put in order. So is there a motion to approve the revised minutes? Okay, Ms. Duncan, and seconded by Dr. Wilner. All in favor, aye. Okay, carries unanimously. Now it's time for the superintendent's report. Dr. Hargens.
Thank you, Chair Jones, members of the board. It's my pleasure to call to your attention a few items of special interest. The Code of Acceptable Behavior and Discipline in the Student Bill of Rights sets the behavioral expectations for our students and the expectations for our staff regarding appropriate consequences. It was approved by the board last year on June 10th, 2014. Training happened last summer to ensure consistency among schools. The code, remember, is just one piece of a system of support. The code sets the expectations. PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention Support, restorative practices, and student response teams work to promote behaviors so that students choose behaviors that do not violate the code. Tonight, we are submitting editing changes only. Again, the document, the Code of Acceptable Behavior and Discipline in Student Bill of Rights, has editing changes only. On April 27, 2015, the board approved the submission of a revised waiver request for a waiver of accountability administrative procedures and guidelines for limited English proficiency students that would have provided relief from the requirements in 703 KAR 5240 in order to consider both English language and content proficiency in definitions of academic achievement. Any LEP student who scored low on the English language proficiency assessment would have had their accountability for any state assessment attributed to the district, not to the individual school. We were notified by the Kentucky Department of Education that state and federal regulations prohibit the state board approval of that waiver. So the next step would be for the state to request a waiver at the federal level. One of our goals this year is to enroll 3,500 students in early childhood education by the start of school. We already have 2,656 students enrolled, and I will keep the board updated as the number increases every 2 weeks. We are still on target for the Success Pathways School on Bashford Manor Lane. The work right now is continuing with an emphasis on student placement, staffing, and defining and developing professional development. The next community stakeholders meetings for JCPS Strategic Plan Vision 2020 are scheduled on the following dates. Thursday, May 28th, 6 p.m. at Westport Middle, 8100 Westport Road. There's also a website that has all this information on it. There are 2 Spanish language meetings to be held at La Casita Center on Wednesday, May 27th at 6 p.m. and Friday, May 29th at 10 a.m. There's also going to be a special online meeting on Tuesday, June 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m., and it will be accessible from a link on this web page. So this community input is important, and it will inform the development of Vision 2020, the basis for targeting resources and research-based strategies for maximum impact on student achievement. A community meeting regarding the new Norton Commons elementary school boundaries is scheduled this Wednesday, May 27th at 7 p.m. at Chansey Elementary School, and that's at 4301 Murphy Lane. And I just want to end by congratulating Doss High School as a grand prize winner of the Lead to Feed World Hunger Leadership Challenge. The Kentucky Refugee Ministries will receive $25,000. Doss High School received $20,000 in Apple products. A ceremony is planned to recognize Doss at the school on Friday, May 29th at 11 a.m. Chair Jones, this concludes my report and my recommendations for approval of the consent agenda later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. If I could just have one clarification, Dr. Hargens, on the waiver denial from the state for the for our request concerning English language learners. Is that now is that proposal dead, or are we coming back with something different? I apologize, I didn't quite follow.
It's my understanding that KDE is working on a waiver, a potential waiver at the federal level. So that's
So-
the next step.
So the next step is they ask the federal government sort of for the space within which they could grant a waiver.
Right, and
to
it's
us.
my understanding that other states have requested and been granted similar waivers.
Okay,
So
all right, so that is likely to come back to us.
we will keep you updated on that.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Harkins? Yes, Lisa?
Just a quick one about the Success Pathways School, and I don't know if you can answer it tonight or maybe for the next time. I know you're reporting on that at every meeting. There's a community group that's been established, 3 really wonderful community experts, and I'm just curious to know how they're being included and involved in the process, and if the board is going to have an opportunity to hear directly from them about the progress of the new school.
Absolutely, and what we need to do is touch base with them again, and it was our goal as we're ready to implement the school that they would report out on it. And they're part of a group that would actually do a walkthrough and an oversight of the actual plans that are in place.
Okay, very good. Dr. Harkins, we have a couple of action items. The first one is the proposed approval of the tentative budget for fiscal year 16. Would you like to introduce that?
Yes, Chair Jones, and actually CFO Harden and the Director of Budget, John Colopy, will come to the table. What I want to remind everybody is that the tentative budget is the second budget. The first budget is the draft budget. The tentative budget, which we're asking for approval for tonight, includes specific expenditures. It is not as precise as the third budget, which is called the working budget, which the board will receive in September. That third budget includes actual enrollments and revenues based on actual assessment rates. So I want to just highlight some important elements of the budget. The first is that our school-based funding has increased by 2.16% from this current year, and non-school-based funding has decreased by 2.16% from this year. This continues our trajectory of increasing dollars for school-based spending where it directly impacts students. So over 4 years in the budget document, you'll notice that school-based spending has increased by $245.9 million, and over 4 years, non-school-based spending has decreased by $92.8 million. The second thing I'd like to point out is that our budget is aligned with our strategic priorities, which include the following: $5.4 million total to new and expansion of existing programs. That includes the expansion of English as a second language services, the establishment of and support for 2 District of Innovation schools that will be K-8. That's the Waldorf-inspired Maupin Elementary and Atkinson's Reach Academy. For the next year, 15-16, we are also opening Kennedy Elementary due to the need for seats in Cluster 8. Funding for the Bellarmine Literacy Project supports the 3rd grade pledge so that all 3rd graders can be reading at grade level. Overall spending and all funds for early childhood in this budget is $40.7 million, which is an increase of $176,000. There are $3.3 million additional local dollars that have been added to early childhood funding due to decreases in state and federal grants and to cover transportation costs for early childhood. The goal is to increase the number of students from 4,018 students, the number served this year, to over 4,100 students next year. And most importantly, the goal is to increase the quality of the service. A strategic priority in this budget is redesigning our alternative, now called Pathway System, to better serve the needs of our students. The Equity Project is a partnership with U of L to provide support to establish school climates that are both responsive and inclusive. $2.2 million local dollars is in this budget to match KETS, Kentucky Education Technology System funds, to provide for technology needs in the classroom. This budget maintains our support of junior achievement and the Fund for the Arts 5x5 program. Over $1 million is in this budget to maintain our Friskies, our Family Resource Youth Service Center coordinators. And there are $4 million in Section 7 dollars that will be used to focus on expanded learning and differentiation to support our GAP students. This budget, you will recall from your review of the document on page 10, includes a visual of the unfunded mandate of a 2% plus steps increase for our employees. This budget had to include local revenues of $24.2 million to cover next year's mandated salary increase. This year's budget, I will remind you, had to include $15.1 million in local dollars to cover this year's salary mandate. Included in the draft budget was a salary projection that included 260-day employees working a 262-day calendar for next year. This tentative budget does include the salary for 260-day employees to be on a 262-day work calendar. So the working budget, remember the third budget, this is the second budget, the third budget, the working budget in September, will include more precise revenue totals based on actual assessments, which include tax rate. So CFO Harden and Mr. Colopy are available to answer any questions.
Okay, would anyone like to ask a question? Mr. Hadaway.
Thank you for this report, and thank you for outlining the assumptions and putting some narrative in there. Helps me. There's just a couple things that I just need a little more clarity about, and forgive me if you already mentioned before, Cordelia, but just to re-emphasize or hear them will help my understanding. In the construction fund, talk about $34 million in new year funding, and that funding sources from bond revenue. However, not all those capital projects have been identified. Does that include Norton Commons, and does that is that part of the whole facility plan that we do every 5 years? Is it?
The construction fund there is a long-range facility plan that is presented every 4 years. It's also updated at times throughout the year as needed. The construction fund, we have the building fund and construction fund. Construction fund comes from bond proceeds, which at this point has not been included in this tentative budget, but it will come forward. Then we have capital outlay, which is $8 million, and then around 32 to 34 million that's building fund. Those dollars, that roughly 40 million total, is used to pay mostly the debt payment on the construction that we've already done, HVAC projects, building of schools, and there are 20-year bond payments. We have some funds left over, and that is used also for capital projects. The Norton Commons has been allocated in that bonding construction fund dollars.
Okay. SEEK formula is mentioned a lot, as we know. It's very important. But on page 8, there was a sentence that jumped out on me, and I just want you to share, if you can, a little bit more about the commentary. There is a revision of the transportation formula within the SEEK formula is needed in order to eliminate a significant number of districts receiving more revenue for transportation than their cost. Can you highlight that a little bit more for me?
Within the SEEK formula, there is a formula embedded in that also called the transportation formula. The state legislator for several years has not increased the actual transportation funding. Within that formula, it's a density type formula. So depending upon where you fall, your district falls within that density map, determines how much you are going to get reimbursed for your student transportation. In this district, it's around 50%, but some districts actually get more than 100%. which has been our complaint for many years. We have asked that the formula be looked at and that no district would receive more than 95%. But so far, no one has tackled that transportation formula.
Have we instituted any of that in our advocacy efforts at all? Have we done anything like that? Any of those engaged in any of those conversations?
There has been, not as far as your legislative priorities, that has not been on the agenda that I remember since I've been CFO, although there has been discussions by board members with legislators individually. I also have talked with several when I go to Frankfurt and talk about the formula with the finance department as well as legislators.
And then lastly, I want to know, when we are trying to compare to peer districts, one of the conversations we've had a lot of times is what is instructional and non-instructional funds. And I noticed in one of the narratives that that's determined by KDE, and that speaks to how do we compare with the peer districts. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the struggle there, and what's our best options to kind of compare, instead of apples and oranges, to compare us to other peer districts and identify those funds equivalent to what we see in Baltimore County and Long Beach?
One of the things that we're in the process of doing is to talk with each of our peer districts. We are using 10 peer districts, and with the help of Data Management Department, Dr. Radowski's unit, they have actually generated a survey, and we did get some information back as to what these peer districts include in their instruction. We found that one district in particular included almost any administrator that they have in their schools as instruction, such as counselors, nurses, various other positions. A librarian was even included. In JCPS, those are considered administrators at the school level. We only include teachers, instructional, that are actually in the classroom helping with instruction, and then what materials are related to the instruction in the classroom. Most of the districts did include more in their instruction than what we do, but the way to really identify is what we can do on our side to make comparative numbers. For instance, if a district includes counselor, then we can add the counselors to ours in order to have a comparative number, just to say what if. The problem is that you still won't get a complete comparison of all districts because they vary so much. So unless you can get the details and the cost from each of those districts, you're not going to have a complete comparison. But that is something we're trying to do. But most districts, they will give us some information, but when you start drilling down, it is very time consuming for them. So we're at their mercy how much they will cooperate. But anything we do benchmark against, we have told those districts we will also share with them so that they can see what those results are, and hoping that that will help a good relationship with us.
And Goal Clarity coaches and assistant principals in elementary schools, how do we define them?
It's in administration. It is not in, it's school administration. It's not in instruction.
But I would argue, and you probably already do this, well, I've seen you do this, is they have a direct impact on student achievement as well.
Absolutely.
Despite being, listed as that kind of fund.
Yes.
So.
Goal Clarity coaches in particular, what we say, it gives the teacher the opportunity to teach, the counselors the opportunity to counsel. It gives them opportunities to work with like the PLCs, the professional learning communities, so that they can help the teachers with issues that they have with differentiation with particular students even, and how they can collaborate and help a student.
And lastly, another thing, point of clarification, Section 7. Can you break down how that is different from Section 4, 5, and 6 as well?
Section 4 is certified staffing that is determined based on the formula that the board approves normally in January, and it's based on students, the number of students. Section 5 is the classified staffing. That also is based on the formula. And Section 6 is the instructional supplies, operational supplies, and that is 3.5% of the SEEK per pupil. However, the budget bill at the state level has allowed districts, because of the budget crunches, to only provide $100 per student if the board so elects to do so. Jefferson County has continued to provide $140 per student. Section 7 is what they call what is left over. The board has decided that the Section 7 funds will be is to help with the interventions, the academics that are needed, the extra help that is, and instructional time that is needed for GAP students. That is the main issue of what that Section 7 is being used for.
Thank you. Thank you.
Steph?
I was trying to get this answered before the meeting. I don't know if it's Dr. Harkins, just the two questions about the preschool initiative. I don't know if I just didn't get it, but I just wanted to see how the JCPS budget funding is going with that. We heard a real good presentation about a preschool program, like $6 million toward it, that was put together by the academic team after they locked themselves in a room for a couple days or something. So I don't know who wants to take that.
Well, and I'll just reiterate that in this budget for early childhood is $40.7 million. And that's an increase, a slight increase from last year. But because of reductions in state and federal grants and in the cost of transportation for early childhood, we put 3.3 million local dollars in there. The goal is to increase the number of students served, but to also increase the quality of the service. So Dr. Branham and Dr. Hensley believe, and Dr. Nix believe that that before you expand too quickly, too fast, you've got to make sure that you have foundationally things straight to be able to expand. So what you'll see is a later, faster expansion, but there will be more students served next year. And there is $3.3 million that we had to add to be able to serve the current students plus the additional students. So, but what they're working on is a long-range plan. When will we get to really rapidly increasing the number? And when can we ensure that the quality of preschool is there, as indicated by the Brigance results? Our students who do our pre-K should do better on Brigance results than students who are somewhere else. So does that help?
Yes, it does.
Just to make sure I understand it, sorry, but
no, go ahead.
Steph reminded us that I think Dr. Hensley made a presentation that said $6 million is what we needed to get to in incremental funding from where we are to cover whatever the goal was of early childhood expansion. Is the 3.3 you just identified 3.3 of that 6.0, or is it just replacing state money that fell away to keep us where we were, or something in between?
Something in between. So what Dr. Hensley talked about is a multi-year plan that would require that much money. But I guess the reality is that it's going to cost us $3.3 million of local dollars to plug the state and federal holes and to provide transportation to increase the amount that I talked about increasing. So,
one of the other things in that $6 million plan, I do know the staff has those improvements that they can do that are not requiring additional funds. They are working on some of those items. Right. I don't have that list in front of me, but there are some improvements that are being made that they can do with the funds they have currently.
Okay, and then do you think the way we should look at this budget is a little bit, but not very much, toward the expansion goal that was laid out to us.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the same thing with the third grade pledge. Is this budget funding, our ability to carry out, or start, or, how are we moving on that?
This budget includes an expansion of the Bellarmine Literacy Project, so it does include an expansion of what happened this year. So it does include that.
And then, Cordelia, in the assumptions that are made, it looks like in the future we're going to be looking at the tax assessments for property in Jefferson County that come in July. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
At this point, I do not have the actual tax assessments in. I will get that normally towards the end of July. Now, what I understand, there are some assessments that have been substantial. Of course, there's also an appeal process that the homeowner can go through, so that's what they're working through right now. When I get those final numbers, depending upon our revenue, and that's how the taxes are determined, our revenue that is generated this year, so we will report that at the end of July to the Department of Revenue and the Department of Education. They then take the assessments that the PVA here locally has generated, and they will determine from that the maximum tax rate to provide a 4% revenue increase for the district, which is the most this board could levy. Dependent upon the assessments, the rate could go up or it could go down in order to generate that 4%. Of course, there's also a rate that would equal the same amount of revenue as we generated this year. So at this point, I don't have all the variables in order to tell you what the rate will do, but we will come forward in August. Once I get the report, then I have 30 days to present to you for you to approve whatever rate you decide to go with. The assumption in this budget is assuming that you will put forward the 4% additional revenue.
So if the assessments are up and not too many appeal, I guess, because you will know how many have appealed and not paid their taxes in a sense until they wait their appeal process. But there's a chance that the revenue would be up sharply and that there might not need to be such a high tax increase.
That is possible. Yes.
Can I try this? I was going to go the same way. So let's just say the assessed value of property after appeal is up by 10%. That means that our revenue goes up by 10%, right?
No,
What happens? Tell us what happens, because I think a lot of people, including me, find this it's a kind of a confusing formula. So if the property's 10% more valuable, what happens?
Actually, because our SEEK formula, the money we receive from the state, is also based on a portion of our local effort. So when assessments go up, our state amount goes down. So we locally have to make up that difference.
Right.
And it's pretty much an offset as far as what they gain to distribute elsewhere. We lose, and we must come up with the difference in the local side.
But so, again, sticking with the 10% increase, we have a tax rate that today is
71 cents per 100.
71 cents. Mm-hmm. So in order to get 4% more revenue dollars out of property that's 10% more valuable, we would probably reduce the tax rate. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the math would be, but by 5% or 6%
probably,
or something,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And then there's this complicating factor of the SEEK formula that makes it not as positive as it appears it would be. So
that's correct.
The state has its hand in the pocket first of Jefferson County when our property rises in value. But if 10% positive is right, then taxpayers could actually see a reduction in their rates.
Yes, that is correct.
But we don't know yet what that would be.
Right.
Is that, you were going at the same point, right?
I was.
Yeah.
And then the final question is, we saw the 20, arts and music teachers was up there on the board, and I see that we are funding the 5x5, but we funded the 5x5 last year. So has there been any increase in arts, music instructors to the program?
I do not have the counts as far as what the schools have decided as far as the number of teachers. John, have you seen anything yet?
No.
Yeah. So we would be able to give you more of that when we present the final budget, the working budget.
Okay. Chris, do you want to?
Sure, I'll go. So about a year ago, we had a really interesting conversation in here, didn't we? That is not going to happen this time. There's been significant changes in the course of the last year, how the budget has been presented, and I will say thank you for that.
Thank you.
I do appreciate that. We also have the transparency website online now, which is really nice. I think that's a fantastic thing that we have for our constituents to be able to go in and drill down on that, and gives the community as a whole a way to crowdsource that and see how their money is being spent. I will say that obviously it's a work in progress, so to those of you in the public that understand that, yes, there are some areas in there that we are confused on too, but we're working to clarify that, and it's not a finished product as at this point. I also want to say thank you to the superintendent for reconsidering that 260-day calendar. I know that through our discussions it didn't seem to be worth it, and I do want to appreciate the fact that we are making that change, and I know that's going to impact our budget by $600,000 as well, correct?
The actual Munis report that had already included 262 days because of the time that we locked it in.
Okay.
We were not aware that we may be changing it.
Okay, so there really isn't really an impact to the budget that we're looking at right now?
Right.
Good, okay. So a couple other points on this is, one, I would like to have, I would say the communications department, whenever that might be around, make a case that if we are going to be increasing taxes, that you start making that case sooner rather than later. And of course, I know that's kind of impossible to do when you don't have the full story, and especially after hearing some of the conversation between Member Horn and Chair Jones, that's something that I'm sure the public certainly has a vested interest in, as well as I, as a property owner. But once we do find out some more information, I think it's really, really important that the administration make the case that if you're going to make this recommendation, it isn't just to the board, it's to the entire community. Last, I do have kind of an open question, something that I'd like to have, if y'all can look through. And I had a community member come up to me within the past week or two and talk about a concern that he had regarding some of the federal funds that come through the district. Now, federal funds don't make up a huge part of the district's budget, I understand that. Right. But the concern was that these funds could be passed through or coming through the state level, and that some of these funds can be diverted, depending on how possibly diverted. And it was concerned, his concern was that we're actually seeing the funds that we should be seeing, and that they're not being diverted in the process of passing through the state. That's probably, I'm sure that's not an unknown issue or concern that you've come across, but it's something I'd like to put to you. If you have an answer for it, that's fantastic. I know I haven't really prepped you for that, but if you could circle back around to us and let us know something about that.
Some of the federal funds at the state level is formula driven, how we receive those funds. Some are appear to be maybe a little more subjective at the department level than a complete formula driven, but we'll research and give you the breakdown of those that pass through the state.
Yeah, we just appreciate making sure that we're getting accurate numbers for our budget, and calling that out if we find out that it's otherwise. As I said, I'm very happy with the information we've received. Thank you for making those changes and making our budget a lot clearer. That's really all the comments I have.
Thank you. Lisa, do you have anything?
Just a couple of quick things, I guess. The cost of standardized testing, there's at least a public perception that standardized testing is very expensive. And I know that some of it we're required to do by the Fed and by the state, but we also have district mandated standardized testing that we pile on top of what we have to do. And I'm just curious what the additional cost is to the district every time that we add standardized testing. I didn't prep you for that question either, but I'm curious about that.
And that we'll have to research a little more to give you a complete answer.
Okay, all right. And the other thing I want to say about the 262 versus the 260, we heard from some folks from AFSCME at the last meeting, from some hourly workers, and when we asked some questions since the last meeting, it looked like people entitled to the extra 2 days, that their annual pay ranged from $12,500 a year all the way up to $171,000 a year. So I am delighted, of course, for the folks at the low end of the pay scale and for our hourly workers, that they're not going to be asked to take a furlough for those 2 days. I want to say a personal thank you to Dr. Hargens, who's told me that she's not going to be taking an additional 2 days pay on top of her salary. Most of us who work annual salary don't expect to be paid extra days according to how the calendar falls. And I would just love to see folks at the high level join the Dr. Hargens Club and saying, let's put that back into the coffers for the students. And again, it seems like it's not exactly industry standard for salaried workers to have a daily rate. So that was educational for me, and so that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, Linda?
Well, I was also going to make a comment on that, and I just hope that we have an opportunity to change the wording, because it's a year-round contract, and I don't know where 260 days came from, where we label this as 260 days because we have more 261 days than we do 260, and not quite as many 262. But I don't know where that labeling of that concept came from. But I hope that we can talk about that and maybe just change that to year-round contracts, because it's all based on the number of days or work days in the year. Right. And if it's a year-round contract, then it's work days year-round in that year. So I just hope that we can have that conversation sometime between now and next year. I did want to ask Dr. Hargens on the equity project. Are there particular schools that have been identified for this, where these teams are supposed to visit, or I wasn't sure about that when I saw that in there, and does it have to do with particular schools that have been identified?
I'll let Mr. Marshall answer.
So, and we have the U of staff here that's going to champion that in should it get voted on. There is 15 schools that we would consider low performing, and hopefully 15 schools that we would consider high performing. And you kind of cross-reference the culture and climate of the building, along with subscribing some or identifying some inequities and equities in the school. It really matches well with Dr. Hensley's reading project, in that we're trying to see where the deficits are or where the successes are, and looking at how we can manage and mitigate the good things that we're doing inside of our schools. Have the schools been identified? Yes. Yet no. But they will be should this get voted on. And it's a very extensive project. U of L has bare bones did as much as they can, but they've done this work in Oklahoma as well. And it's proven to really help Tulsa and some other school districts. And it just links into some of the work we're already doing inside my department and under Dr. Hargens' leadership.
All righty, thank you.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions. Start with one comment. I want to echo the thanks for the quality of the report. I think it has improved significantly, and I particularly am grateful for the multi-year trend analysis and the clarity and how easy you've made it for us to understand the rates of growth in both dollars and percentage. I think Chris called out the transparency website, and I think in this context it's good to remind everybody that the state auditor spoke to Dr. Hargens and a panel on Thursday of last week, and was quite complimentary about the progress that JCPS has made, particularly in improving clarity and transparency. So I do think this was a good package. We've made a ton of progress, so thank you. One thing that I couldn't pull out of all this, and it's a little bit like a, it's one of those long-term things that I know, Cordelia, you've talked about before, but could you comment a little bit on the cost of the retirement benefits that the district is picking up? I know in several of the elementary and middle school, they would pop out as by far the fastest growing elements in the cost structure, but could you just sort of put a very general context around that and also look ahead for us at what's coming?
Back in fiscal year 10-11, the Kentucky Teachers Retirement System, the district had no contribution to that program on behalf of the employee. It was a state contribution only. But then went to the legislature, and for FY12, they implemented a cost to the district. And it was a gradual increase in cost. It started at 0.25% of certified wages, or those participating in the teacher's retirement system, which includes John and I, because our positions require at minimum a 4-year degree. So any position that requires a 4-year degree, by the explanation as far as with KTRS, then you're in that particular system. So then in the next year it went up to 0.5%. It continued to increase. So in FY11 we paid 0%. In FY16 it's 3%. In FY16 our projection is that is $15.7 million that this board did not have to cover, where they back in 11 they had no cost to that. In addition, if it's a federal program, it's even costing more. Our state paid benefits has also increased. Now that is at the state level, and most of that being in the medical insurance has increased. And we've had other increases like in CERS. Although the rate itself has decreased since FY12, there's been a 1.9% decrease, but there's an increase in dollars of $500,000. So their rate fluctuates according to what their actuarials determine should be our contribution level. Then we have, every time when salaries increase, then you also have increases in FICA and MED, so there's several benefit costs that are automatic.
So let me just play it back and make sure I understand. Over the last 4 or so years, the state has, because the state legislature has failed to appropriate enough money to fully fund its contribution to the teachers' retirement system and possibly other, and healthcare, not just retirement, but also healthcare. Yeah. We have been assessed a rising percent, but we mentioned earlier, Dr. Hargens mentioned, and it's in your presentation, the unfunded mandate of 2% salary increase plus steps. But in addition, there's a 3% locally funded benefit, retirement and health benefit in that. So it's really more like, again, and it's money that's coming from the local funding sources rather than the state funding sources. And it's also money that the state is setting the requirements for rather than locally. So that's what is it, 75 or 80% of our costs are salaries. So if you add another 6% on top of that, it's real money. Can you maybe give a quick update on the accounting rule treatment for the unfunded liability for the pension funds? We've talked about that before, but is there any likelihood that that is going to jump up on our balance sheet in the coming year?
Yes, I think it will, because from what I understand, the Governmental Accounting, the Standards Board has not changed their stance in that that could be a liability. So therefore, we will have to book that liability. At this point, I do not have the number. I'm thinking we're maybe around $200 million that we're looking at. But I'm hoping to know more in the next few months, actually.
So if we had another $200 million liability, instead of a $90 million reserve fund, we would have a $110 million deficit fund.
Yes.
And a big puzzle, right?
Yes, as would every district that
With every
I'm
other
aware of
district.
would have the same type of problem.
Okay. Well, I think all we can really do about that is highlight that that is an issue that we may have to grapple with if it comes forward.
I'd like to make one point that probably I think the board knows, but maybe the public is not aware of. Those individuals that participate in the teachers' retirement system, they do not participate in Social Security.
Right.
So that is their
Right.
only retirement that they
Right.
will have.
And isn't it also true that, I mean, what we've been talking about here have been the employer-funded portions, but there have also been employee-funded
Yes.
elements as well. Can you,
Yes.
if the local funding of the retirement and health benefit has gone up approximately 3%, what's been the hit on the employees in percentage terms?
The same thing
The
has been
same.
hit with them. We are at right
Okay.
at 13%, isn't that right?
Okay, all right, so again, this is the local implication of state underfunding of the retirement and health schemes. Okay, then I just want to make sure that I've understood the kind of the concluding Jeremiah of your, of your document. You issue a very clear call that spending down, that for the board to spend down the reserve fund and not increase the revenue base will fairly quickly put us deeply in the hole. And I think the rationale for that, we've already touched on these, but just to make sure I'm not missing anything, we have had 2 years of unfunded salary increases coming from the state, totaling about $25 million, and now incorporated into the sort of the run rate of where we go from here. We have disadvantages under the SEEK formula that are too complicated for me to understand, but I'm convinced are disadvantageous to urban districts. We've got the retirement plan, which the issues are likely to grow until the state does something. And so we really could be looking at a pretty significant, sort of $20 to $50 million gap if we don't keep up with it.
Absolutely.
Which I think is why you have incorporated the expectation that we will increase or decrease the tax rate as necessary to get to that 4% revenue increase.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I think that was a clear explanation, and again, thank you for the document. Is there a motion to approve the tentative budget for fiscal year 2015-16? Mr. Hadaway moves, Ms. Duncan seconds. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Carries 5-1. Let's move on now, Dr. Hargens. Thank you very much. Dr. Hargens, let's move on to the approval of the 55,000 Degrees Founding Partner Pledge Renewal.
Yes, one of our most powerful partnerships is our collaboration with 55,000 Degrees, and each partner at the table makes a commitment and a pledge to be part of something that's greater than itself to enable this community to have more degrees. So Tamara Lewis is here. She's going to talk about two things. She's going to talk about what our new pledge is, but she's also going to talk about how we're trying to combat summer melt, which is students actually not going to college after they're accepted to college. So Tamara, thank you for presenting this.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. On April 28th of this year, at the request by the Executive Director of 55,000 Degrees, we were asked to, as a founding partner, to review our original pledge and goals and targets, because right now we're at the halfway mark to 2020. And also, some of the data targets we set may be out of date due to the changes to the calculation of the graduation rate. And so we took this opportunity to review our primary outcomes and the leading indicators that we initially set. And I just want to emphasize that we already have set some strong goals already. But in review, we looked at the graduation rate, and the state has adjusted the targets for the graduation rate to align with the state. We decided we needed to make our graduation rate goals stronger. Initially, we had the percentage of graduates to be 90%. We increased that to 93%. That's one of the changes that we made. And what that's going to do is align us to be on the same targets, not only for 55,000 degrees, but also KDE, because by 2022, we're supposed to be at 98%. So by 2020 for 55K, we would have to be at 93%. So that's one of the changes that we made to our existing pledge. And the other thing we took the opportunity to do was streamline the data. We had some leading indicators where we were tracking the GED, dropouts, and ACT. But with the new graduation cohort rate, that data for the GED and dropouts is factored into the cohort rate. So instead of duplicating data trends, we just wanted to streamline, because we're already tracking graduation rate. And as far as ACT, instead of tracking that separately, that is also in the college career readiness calculation. So we wanted to just combine and streamline that data. And since we already had strong goals, the increased the percentage of graduates going to college to 85%, that remained the same. Increased the percentage of graduates that are college career ready to 90%, that remained the same. And decreased the percentage of high school freshmen, that's the 9th graders, that are retained, to decrease that 6%. And that remained the same. And also, not only just for 55K, but we set the same goals for 15K, which is the African American students. So those were the changes. And we have a commitment letter that we have to go to 55,000 degrees to see if for these changes, and we're asking for you all to approve that. But in collaboration with 55K, we're also are addressing this phenomenon called summer melt. And what we define as summer melt, those are the students who fill out a FAFSA. That's the free application for federal student aid. Those are that's a college intent. So students are filling that application out saying, okay, I intend to go to college. And of those students who do not show up in the fall, those are the students who are melting off. And that's how we do the determine what summer melt is. Now, what we've done is drill down into to see who these students are. Why aren't these students enrolling? Well, in 2008, the melt percentage was just 6%. The latest data we have right now is 2013, and that increased up to 20%. And so that's why this is a big phenomenon. What is going on with our melters? So when you look at the demographics, it's very diverse. The 20% of those students, which the ends, that's 724 students. And 47% of those students are white students, 45% are African American, 5% Latino, and 3% other races. So it's a diverse group. So we're like, what are the barriers? And we were shocked to see that 84% of these students were Pell eligible. That means they could get free money to go to school. And also 45% of this group also could get grant money to go to school, tuition money they didn't have to pay back. And then we thought, well, but maybe they didn't have the criteria to be admitted to college. Maybe their ACT score was not high enough to get in. That was a barrier. Well, 18% of those students had an ACT composite score of 20 or higher, and that was shocking. But one barrier that we saw is that 57% of these students are first gen versus first generation, the first ones to go to college. And so that's what JCPS in collaboration with 55K and other partners, we want to put the freeze on summer melt. That's the term that we're using, how we're going to do that. And there's a couple of initiatives that we're implementing this summer. We have the summer coaching program that's going to start this summer, and it's going to be summer coaching navigators. And they're going to work with approximately 200 college-bound grads to help them bridge that summer, to stay in contact with them, make sure they know their next steps so they can actually show up on campus in the fall. That's one initiative. And the other initiative is JUMP. And this is with JCTC, it's a Jefferson Mentor Program that connects students with freshmen that are coming in with near peer. So they have developed an online application. Students who are going to attend JCTC, they can go online and apply to be what they call a jumper. So they'll have mentors and have meetings on campus and kind of get more information on what to do. Now, a couple of other things that we're doing, we have some campaigns. One campaign has already passed, was on May 18th. We had the college signing day. JCPS bused approximately 1,300 college-bound seniors to the Yum Center to pledge to complete a college degree, not just go to college, but actually complete a degree. And we also right now have this summer texting campaign going on. And what this is students and parents can receive approximately about 12 messages throughout the summer to give them information about college, next steps. And here's a plug for students to be a part of this. If you're seniors going to college, all you have to do is text student55 to 96714. And parents, you can also be a part of this if you text parent55 to 96714. So.
Okay.
Questions?
Thank you. Are there questions? Linda?
You know, that one of the things I wanted to know was what 55,000 degrees, how it's trying to help increase that college attendance rate, because I think that's part of what this program is about. But one thing that fascinated me was why we chose to bump up our graduation rate. We said 90% graduation rate, and now we've gone to 98% because the cohort graduation rates came in higher. But the problem was the cohort graduation rates were the actual rates. That's what was actually going on out there, and we were the one before, the average freshman graduation rate was figured and not accurate, really, not giving us a true picture of what was going on when kids would move and the school would suffer the penalty of the kid moving. So I never understood why we decided that we'd better bump that graduation rate up to 98. But we've done that, and we've 93% by 2020. And so we're good at drawing these trajectories for JCPS. Who is drawing trajectories for the universities and the post-secondary schools? Because this is 55,000 degrees, and once they leave us, it becomes and get into the post-secondary, then it becomes somebody else's job. So is anybody drawing trajectories for them to meet so that we don't feel like we're the only ones involved in this? Because right now that's the way it sort of feels like. It's our data, and all on us, and it can't be all on us.
Correct. It's actually a committee of folks. I'm part of the 55K data committee, and we have the JCPS, and the Archdiocese is also at the table, and then we have institutions. So there are some universities at the table as well, and people from the workforce is at the table as well. So we're working as a community to come together, and everyone has goals and that they've set in pledges that they're setting and submitting to 55K as well.
It would be so nice if we could see that others have these kind of goals, just like jobs. You know, we would like to see the trajectory for jobs so that when those 55,000 degrees graduate, there are jobs sitting there too. And it would be nice to be able to be tracking all of these trajectories instead of just our graduation and college career ready rate and You know, that's what I look for is when that conversation happens, and
Well-
when the colleges and the universities are able to come up with ways to help their students and tell us about it, because
So I
we
think
see
one
it.
thing we may want to do is invite some of the post-secondary
Yes.
leadership to come, because I think if I understand the data right, and I'm going to characterize the data that you presented, and you tell me if I've got it. JCPS has made good progress around graduation rates and college and career readiness. In fact, we were on target overall last year, and although we're not on target, the trajectory with African American students is correct and the slope is about right. But the problem is kind of a mystery. The summer melt and the fact that students who are prepared for college according to our assessment, and in many cases funded for college, don't act and intend to enroll, don't actually enroll. That's the point here, right? And we don't know exactly why, but we have created some interventions that we hope will be helpful. I think the data from the broader 55K group is that once they get to college, the throughput is also getting better. The graduation rates have been higher, but the problem is, there's actually been a drop-off of high school graduates willing to go to college or choosing to go to college. And that's the point here, right? Is that's like the target we've got to get after that we didn't expect.
Right. That's that 20% of, what are the barriers and how we're going to address those. With that texting program, there was a study at Harvard to show just when the texting program model was implemented, they saw 11% increase of those melters actually go to college. So we started that this summer, so hopefully we'll see the same results for implementing this texting model. So
good.
Another question that I also had when I read this in here, I'm wondering why we don't do trajectories based on history anyway. We do them, we can see the historical growth, and we could project out that way as well. But if we don't do that, why are we not tracking all of our gap groups instead of just one gap group like African American? Why haven't we talked about all the other groups that we need to be tracking and who will be contributing 55,000 degrees in here? Has anybody ever talked about that? Or
yes,
is it
and actually the next step, and I've been addressed to start tracking the Latino group, Hispanic Latino group. So I think it's just building, actually seeing what the datas are and how to track it in the groups and the impact. And 55K started the initiative, and we became a founding partner. So it's the city coming together, not just JCPS out, and that's what they wanted to put out there. But I think that's something that we can embrace and start adding those groups as well. Since we're already doing it, let's go ahead and add those other groups as well to see what their progress is too.
We can't help them if we don't know what's happening with them.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Other questions, Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I have several questions. First of all, one of the things I mentioned during one of our last meetings was that we got to meet with the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, and one of the comments that I heard from those students, and these are all students that are representing a cross-section of schools across our district, was the fact that a lot of our students are not, or there's such an emphasis placed on going to college that it seems that a lot of them say, well, college is not my goal, or college isn't where I want to go, and they are looking at vocational type of certifications and going that route. And there seems to be an issue with that, and we were talking about in the fact of how we address dropouts, because a lot of those folks feel that college isn't where they want to go. They want to go a different route, and maybe we should focus in on help those folks or those students, provide supports around getting certifications and whatnot. I kind of wondered with that, because it is 55,000 degrees, I get that, but if there's some way of being able to take in those vocational certifications or going to a community college, which I know is an associate's degree, but getting those other types of certifications to be able to go into a more trade-oriented skill or professional career. Is there any type of mechanism that catches that or is able to track that and seeing if that we can apply that to our goal as well?
Well, I've been around the table, and they've had those talks as well. And that when you're looking at certifications, it gets tricky because one student can have multiple certifications. And when I'm talking about certifications, I'm talking about the certifications that they're getting while they're in a post-secondary institution. And so there's double counts. So it's hard to actually drill down to those, who are those students and what are those certifications. I know from being around the table, what I've heard is that information is really hard to capture, to track, to actually see what needs to be done, you know, at that level. But as far as JCPS, I mean, we have the 5-star schools, you know, and so we have that information that we can track as JCPS, and we also have the KDE industry certs, the certification that our students have to get, which is tied into our college career readiness. So we're already capturing some of that data as well from the industry certs in our college career readiness. So that information is being captured, but we haven't really shored up how do we. It's a tug of war between college, career, and trying to figure that information out.
But an associate's degree, excuse me, counts.
Yeah,
an associate's degree.
Associate's degrees counts.
Oh, yeah.
Those 2-year colleges, that information is included.
So, and I know part of the goal of this is to try and attract more businesses to come into the community to say, hey, look, this is the educational attainment of our Louisville population. I think it's worthwhile, and as you said, they're tracking that and understanding the complexity of being able to track those different types of certifications, what that really means, and counting that accurately. But I think it's worthwhile that we at least try and include that in the picture because not everyone is going to go to college or even wants to go to college. The other thing I was concerned about when you're talking about going to college, and you kind of mentioned 11% of melters do go back to college. I assume that's after taking off a year or something along those lines. Is that what you mean by that?
Well, when I was talking about the study at Harvard, the 11%, they implemented a texting program, which we're launching this summer.
Right.
And they had 11%. They implemented that model, and 11% of those students who were melters actually ended up going to college that within 12 months.
Okay. So probably took a year off because I know that for some of our students, and I know that if you take a year off, then that increases the likelihood of you not actually going to college. I understand that, but there are a significant number of students that do, for whatever reason, maybe they want to break away from mom and dad, for tax reasons or whatnot, to be able to get more Pell Grant eligibility, a number of different reasons, or they just want to travel. They're young, they can do that. So that there is a significant population that do want to take some time for themselves, reassess, figure out what they want to do, and then re-engage in college. So when we start gauging our graduation rate from high school, we are bound by students that graduate high school within 4 years. If they graduate in 5 years, we don't get credit for that. If they graduate in 6 years, we certainly don't get credit for that, even though some of our students, due to special needs, are guaranteed a right to be able to have 6 years of high school to be able to graduate. So we're bound by that by state law, but we're also penalized by not getting them out in 4 years, despite the fact that they may not even be physically able to graduate in 6 years,
right,
or 4 years. So I want to see if that is somehow impacting what is how we're counting that on the 55K side, and also wanting to know how that is related to how that's going to impact our wanting us to increase our graduation rate up to 93% and then eventually to 98% too, because we do have a number of students within our district, because we offer services here that they can't get anywhere else in the state, how that might impact, or is that even a realistic goal to get even all the way up to 98, not just to 93, but to 98, which is what KDE wants us to get to.
Well, one thing I could say about the cohort data and working with it, that we have now that we didn't have before, we know in that denominator of that cohort, we know who those students are. When we had the average freshman graduation rate, we didn't, it was a complex calculation. We didn't know that denominator. And so once we switched to the cohort model, our data went up, and that's why we had an asterisk it, because we had a nice jump in the graduation rate. And with knowing who these students are that's in the denominator helps, number one, on my end, being in data management, gives us cleaner data. We can clean up the data. We can find those students who we have listed as a dropout. Well, they really didn't. They actually enrolled somewhere else. So that's one piece that I'm very familiar with in the data area of that cohort calculation. And I will also say that schools, they have to meet their AMO, and so the state is using the 5-year cohort instead of the 4. So they are factoring in those students that take that extra year to graduate for, so that's part of the school's AMO. So I know they know that they adjusted that for us, but I mean, that's an ambitious target to get to 98% by 2022. So.
I'm apologies, but I'm not done yet. So college aid, you talked about the fact that they're eligible for Pell Grants. First of all, they're eligible, but are they actually, when you say eligible, that means they can get the aid, or hey, they're just in the ballpark and it's going to be a competitive process from that point on? Well, can they actually get the aid? And then how much is it? Would it be enough to actually pay for college?
Well, it's based off their economic status. So, their income, their family income. So, so 84% of their melters could, if they apply, get the Pell eligible money if they apply within a certain time, because the money runs out really quickly. It runs out by February.
All right,
usually is when the money's gone.
That's what I'm talking about. So there's a bucket of money in here that first come, first serve, more or less what you're talking about. So here's my concern about this, where we're talking, and I think this is kind of what to Member Duncan's point is, where we're to some degree saying, JCPS is pushed back on it, or it seems like it's pushed back on JCPS, is saying, hey, you need to do something to prevent this summer melt. College is expensive. It's gone up phenomenal amount of tuition has gone up just crazy. And we're somehow responsible for that, even though we are doing everything we can to be able to move these, increase our graduation rate and propel these students on into college, which I think we're doing a really good job on. Can we do more? Absolutely. I think the texting program is awesome, and I think it's something that's a good way of thinking and being able to use someone else's wheel and not reinvent it. But my concern is here, when we're talking about this, you're also talking about the fact that we have had an increase from 6 to 20% of people who don't go on to college. Well, my other question to that is, not only are we increasing the cost of college, so it might be economically not viable. If I get $500 for a Pell Grant, that's great, but it's not going to really help me with $5,000 per year with tuition. Are we having more people that are applying now than we had before? So we're increasing the pool of people who are actually applying to college, so that can have an increase on that as well.
Right.
I have another let her answer.
Right. I have another couple
we're going
questions.
to Steph. No,
well,
we're going down to
question.
Steph. We're going to move to Steph next.
All right.
Ask your question.
Why are you cutting me off?
Because I'll come back to you, but because you've had the floor for quite a while.
All right, so we can come back.
Well, with that, yes, I would say that, because the way we calculate the summer melt is the students who fill out the FAFSA form, and so we're part of the FAFSA completion initiative. So we've collaborated with KIA, Kentucky Higher Assistance Authority, to receive that data, and so the counselors are making the students, not making the students, but really counseling the students to go ahead, encouraging them to fill out their FAFSA form. So even if a student may be on the cuffs of if they're going to college or not, they're filling those forms out. So because we have this FAFSA initiative, you may have more students who wouldn't otherwise fill one out. They're filling it out. because that's what that's on the checklist of to do for seniors, fill out that FAFSA form. So that number could blow up. So, and that's part of the calculation, is those students who fill out a FAFSA, but then they don't show up in the fall. So that could also increase that number. We just started receiving that FAFSA data a couple of years ago. And so that could be the case as well.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Steph?
I really want to applaud JCPS for recognizing that all kids can go to college and encouraging everyone to fill it out. It will be inspiring to them. And I think it's great, the texting. I will sign up. I will have Nicholas, who's my senior, sign up. And it's just, I applaud JCPS for this effort. It's fabulous. Every kid can go to college.
Okay. Chuck, do you have anything? No. Okay. Chris, back to you.
Actually, upon looking at this, the reason I was asking so many of those questions so fastly is because I feel like there is a time limit on each of us being able to speak. So upon looking at this, I did ask all those questions. So I don't.
So I think I take from the amount of interest that it would probably be good for us to schedule maybe some of the post-secondary partners to come in. There's also a lot of information about the commitments that the other 55K partners, U of L, Bellarmine, the Archdiocese, all the other players, JCTC, have made on the 55K website. So we can go there and answer some of our questions that way. But I think it probably would be good, because what we're really asked to approve now, and the action item is to approve, to authorize Dr. Hargens to extend JCPS's role in this partnership. And it's really, I think what we're really doing is we're agreeing that we're going to all work together. Like summer melt of people who've already graduated from JCPS is not historically part of the district's role. The district's responsibility ended at graduation, and the colleges didn't pick back up until the students showed up there. So what we're really doing is we're kind of agreeing on who's going to take what part of the, kind of the ground that nobody was responsible for. It definitely is an extension, but let's try to see if we can figure that out. Is there a motion to authorize the execution of the Founding Partner Pledge renewal? Ms. Horn moves. Is there a second? All right, Dr. Wilner, all in favor? Aye. Okay, carries unanimously. Thank you. Good discussion, and thank you for the data, and I will remain perplexed about summer melt. Why don't we, let's take a 5-minute break. We can stretch. We can get a bio break if we need. We'll be back just in a moment. All right? 5 minutes.
Very good. Yes.
Hanging on. Still hanging on.
Well.
general, they know if they put up $5, they get 20. Or at least directionally, they understand the way the ratchet goes. What makes it our local but equity used to be right? I'm shocked.
I'm thankful I got a job.
Inquiring minds.
Go straight to one of those candy
So we really have to do an RFP for this. Like we can't just say he's doing this.
Probably an emergency declaration.
No, my problem is I had to do an RFP and I had to use another share budget. We did to that contract. But it's really just because I haven't worked with that organization like the process. They didn't. It wasn't fair. So I was just always waiting for it. And then he came out with the most detailed plan at the lowest price.
There we go. There you go.
We're gonna have it after.
I just think we're gonna leave it.
How are you doing?
That's when you're not going to get there.
And the only way I think he gets something like seriously, that would be.
I am the fence guy. Yeah, well, we've got more. No, now they're not dropping. They're on the way back. This is our first round. We go back at that level. And then next year, hopefully, we'll see. So KDE is trying to make up for the shortfall now. So.
Everybody thinks like there isn't a system, there isn't a process.
All right, let's take our seats. Mr. Brady is item is an information item. Sorry. Next item is an information item. Dr. Hargens, would you like to introduce the acceptance of JCPS Certified Employee Plan?
Thank you, Chair Jones. Actually, what I want to do first is commend the hard work of the EQUOC Committee, the Educator Quality Oversight Committee. They have worked tirelessly, and part of what they've done is created this certified evaluation plan. So Dr. Razor and Mr. McKim are here to give you that. We're not asking for final approval. This is first reading, so they're going to describe what's in it, but I want to commend them. It's 5 administrators and 5 JCTA members that have worked collaboratively together. So Dr. Razor.
I should be able to clear this up pretty quickly. As COO, I'm bringing forth the JCPS CEP for the TPGES and the PPGES as submitted to be submitted to KDE as part of PGES, as part of our EGS created by EQUOC, which includes an LEAP and an addition to the JCBE JCTA contract as mandated by KAR and KRS.
We may go back for another 5-minute break.
And we think it's A-OK.
And
yep. we like that report.
We're for transparency. As Dr. Hargens said, the EQUOC committee has really been, which is our Educator Quality Oversight Committee, a 50-50 committee of teachers and administrators, have worked really almost for 3 years to put together this certified evaluation plan. And as Dr. Hargens also said, tonight we're not asking for the approval of that plan, just this is a first reading as part of the process. We have brought the actual evaluation plan in front of the board twice, and tonight Mr. McKim and I are available to talk about really 2 things that are different. One, we are mandated for the first time by state law to have an LEAP, which is a local evaluation appeals panel. That a panel will be made up of 3 teachers, 2 of which are elected and 1 of which is appointed by the superintendent. We have also, because of our size, been given the latitude by the state to actually create a pool, kind of like a jury pool, where we would have 12 elected members and, is it
6 appointed?
6 appointed members that we could choose from, because in a district this size there could be conflict of interest, or given the timing of how these appeals will happen, that they could all be happening simultaneously. Also, for your perusal, you will see changes to the teacher's contract, and just to hit the high points, there's language cleanup because our prior evaluation system had 10 standards. We now have 4 domains. So cleanup as to that type of thing. Also, that test scores can be used in certain situations as part of evaluation. There'll be advance notice of observations, and then the provisions that do talk about the appeals panel and the stipend that will be paid to teachers who take part on the appeals panel. We're happy to take any questions that you do have.
Yes, Mr. Hadaway.
First, I want to commend both of you all and your committee for working on this. I know it's been a big project, and very excited about it. I do want to ask about the LEAP, just to understand a little bit about that, how that is put together. That's 2 members are elected by certified employees,
yes.
Correct? And also the superintendent shall appoint 1 of 3 members as the LEAP chairperson. And then they come from the pool that you were mentioning?
Yes.
Yeah, in a fairly, typical size Kentucky county, 1 group of 3 people might be sufficient for handling all of the appeals, but in a district of our size, it's not likely that 1 group of 3 could do that. So instead of the employees electing 2, they're essentially going to have 12 that they've elected. We want to do that 4 per year, so that each year 2/3 have some experience. So you're hoping that odds are on every panel there's someone that has done it before, and it's not their first time. Of course, it'll be the first time this coming year for everyone. Sure. But what we'll do is we'll identify a panel of 3 from the 12 that are elected and the 6 that are appointed. We'll pick 2 from the pool of elected and 1 from the pool that's appointed. And it could be that if we don't have any way to know right now how many appeals there will be. It's a brand new system, and people may appeal more than they have in the past because it'll be the first time under the new system. So it could be if we had a lot of appeals, you might have to use all of them concurrently. You might have, you could have up to 6 appeals going at once, and that's just for the teachers. There's also a similar pool for the administrators.
One member is going to be appointed by the board. Can you explain that to me?
Appointed by the superintendent.
By the superintendent?
Yes.
Okay, I'm reading this that says 1 member shall be appointed by the board, and that person shall be a certified employee of the district. And then it says the superintendent shall appoint 1 of the 3 members as lead chairperson. Am I missing some interpretation? I'm on 49.
On page 49?
Top paragraph.
That was draft or sample language from the state, and we adjusted that to fit our context, and I believe that starts on page 53. So what you would want to do, and there was actually some cleanup in the state's language that we did. Okay. So what you want to look at starts on page 53. So the other was just boilerplate, and the actual adaptation for us begins on page 53.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. And do you feel like the 30 days for new hires and the 45 days for late hires is plenty of time for orientation on the evaluation plan? Currently, the way human resources is tackling so many things right now, you feel pretty good that that's a good timetable?
I do.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Duncan.
Well, on the, why is it that you chose to have them elected, and did you name, and you may have had them in there and I didn't see it, the qualifications for somebody who will serve on this committee or this appeals board? Why do you have 6 appointed and 12 elected? Why were not all of them appointed?
Do you want to feel that?
Yeah, the short answer to the question is because that's how the state statute's written. It requires appointment of 1 by the superintendent and election of 2 by the employees. We actually submitted our first draft to the state with a proposal that they would all be appointed, and the state indicated that that would not be, in their judgment, consistent with the statute.
Are there particular qualifications for those people who will be elected?
What the statute says is that essentially anyone who is in that employee group is eligible to run, and if they are elected, then the only criteria is that you'd have to have a teaching license and be gainfully employed, in the school district. Okay. But that's really the only statutory requirement, and we have to comply with that statute.
So that is sort of like a jury pool.
Yes. It is. And then much of the logistics were up to EQUOC to work out. They said you'll have a leap, it'll be consistent this way. Then the timing and the protocols could be made at the local level.
Okay. Are there other questions?
Oh, I just want to know when would these appeals be done? During the summer? Is that what you envision them being done during the summer?
They are only part of the summative evaluation. So you're getting your summative evaluation for the most part near the end of the year, so they would possibly carry into the summer.
Okay.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to say I appreciate the collaboration between teachers and administrators. I think that's a great model. And I think that the likelihood of successful implementation is probably going to be greatly increased because of the collaboration. So thank you.
Well, and on that note, I think it's probably worth just mentioning that this is just a subset of the work that the Educator Quality Oversight Committee is charged with doing. They're really looking at creating a comprehensive educator growth system, and this has pretty much taken up all the air in the room for the past couple years. But it's kind of exciting because when this is finished, they're not done. They have other aspects of how can we be sure that all of the other aspects of what we do support the professional growth of these teachers and help them be as effective over their career as they can be. So there's a lot more for the group to do.
Brent, could you and Mike name the members of the committee? I think their hard work is definitely worth being named.
Absolutely. And it's the kind of thing where you probably lock up when you have to think. But there's Royce Whitman, a librarian at Crumbs Lane. There's Alan Young, who's the project manager. There is Joe McKim, who is a goal clarity coach at Central High School. Tony Prince, who is a teacher at Atherton. Beverly Chesterburton, who is a teacher at Stewart Middle School. There's Marty Polio, who's the principal at Jeffersontown High School. There's Faith Stroud, who's the principal at Frost and who is here with us. There's John Ansman, who is an area superintendent. There's Margie Eckerly, who is an ETC, and there's Tiffany Armour, who is the Human Resources, Director of Human Resources.
Administrative Recruitment Development, yeah.
There you go.
Great. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to receive the report? Okay, Ms. Duncan moves, Mr. Brady seconds. All in favor, aye. Okay, thank you, and I want to thank you also for, again, for your collaboration and also for your humor. It felt good to laugh. Thank you. All right, the last item on the information agenda is a report on summer access and opportunities. Dr. Hargens?
Yes, what we wanted to describe is the importance of continuing to learn over the summer and the opportunities that are available for our students. So summer learning falls within the Division of Equity. Mr. Marshall?
All right. Good afternoon. We're going to fly through this presentation, but we don't want you to fly past it because it is some very important work and some information that we're going to give you. Also, it kind of is a good scaffold onto what Tamara was presenting on. We were talking about college access. Now we're talking about still our JCPS students and summer access and what we're doing and, of course, stuff we need to do moving forward. I will turn it over to Melissa Barman and Dr. Gold, who will present this.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing us some time to share with you the importance of what summer learning loss is to our students, especially to our students that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Access to quality summer programming leads to student success, bottom line. And without those opportunities, without that access, it leads to a continuing widening achievement gap, and which Dr. Gold will illustrate with a video.
Well, before I get to the video, I'd like to talk a little bit about the cartoon that has become our mantra in diversity, equity, and poverty, looking at the difference between equality and equity. And if you look at the illustration, it shows that with equality, we're giving every child the same thing, but we're not getting every child to the proficiency line. But if you look at the equity, we're giving each student what they need, and with summer learning, we're trying to do the same thing, giving equitable access to quality programs. And we have a brief video that we'd like you to look at. It sort of illustrates where the achievement gap starts and how it continues to widen.
Let's look at two children, one from a middle-income family, the other from one of the millions of low-income American families. As the two kids head off to kindergarten, look what happens. The middle-income child starts out with a 6-month lead. The low-income child is already falling behind because of a lack of access to early reading and preschool education. During their year in kindergarten, in the same school and classroom, the two children will learn at about the same rate, so we'll move them both forward 9 months. But look what happens in that first summer between kindergarten and first grade. Our middle-income child moves ahead about a month in reading because learning of one kind or another continues over the summer. The low-income child falls back about 2 months. So when school begins again, when they go back for first grade, the gap between them has already widened. During first grade, again, they move ahead at about the same rate, another 9 months. That next summer, the activities and lifestyle of the middle-income family keep that child moving forward, but the low-income child has fewer opportunities to reinforce good habits like reading, and that child falls farther behind. Then we come to second grade, and again, our two children learn at the same rate. But the summer after second grade sets our low-income child back again, and our middle-income child moves forward again, and the gap widens again. By just the third grade, the two children are already far apart. By the end of fifth grade, the gap between the children is 2.5 to 3 years. It will keep growing through middle school. So you see, without addressing what's happening during the summer, it is impossible to ever catch up. It's impossible to close the gap. No matter how much high-quality learning goes on from September to June, every year the gap widens.
So I think you can see from that video that the achievement gap is not just in academic achievement, but it's also it's an opportunity gap. The opportunity to attend high-quality out-of-school programming in the summer, cultural enrichment activities. And Mrs. Barman is going to talk a little bit about the cost that our classroom teachers see in how students not being prepared in the summer affects the classroom.
As Dr. Golds, as the video illustrated, the summer learning loss is not just something that is advocated, is working with our out-of-school time providers. It's not just an advocate for summer learning programs. It's also coming from our classroom teachers. Our classroom teachers are seeing the benefits of our most struggling students being involved in good, high-quality summer programming. Because what they see is when those students come back into the classroom at the beginning of the school year, those students are prepared and ready to move forward, and they are not spending perhaps 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes 5 weeks, reteaching skills that students had lost over the summertime. They can spend that valuable time working with those students to provide the concepts and skills that they want to move them forward for. And it's not only our classroom teachers that are supporting summer programming, but it's also our own Vision 2015. If you see from the slide, every single one of our 4 focus areas in 2015 shows strategies for increasing access and summer programming for our students. So you can see there's multiple strategies in each and every one of our focus areas. And knowing the importance of what summer learning is to our students, we are also base it on the power of what our partnerships are. JCPS has a strong history of partnerships within our community, and so we want to build on that, because research has shown that if you work with community partners, that you can have more meaningful summer activities, you can have more variety of summer activities, and it's more cost effective. So if you take, like our illustration shows there, if you take the community-based organizations and you take our faith-based organizations and work together with the district, we can provide quality summer programming and access for some of our most struggling students. And Dr. Gold is going to show you, or going to explain to you, some of our partnership programs that we have going on right now.
Well, as you can see from the slide, we have a myriad of summer programs available. But I'm going to talk about just a couple that I think will be of a great interest to you. The first is our Summer Boost program, which is provided by the district through our Title I program for rising first and second graders at Title I schools. And we all know that that's a wonderful way to get at our disadvantaged students. The second is one that we're very proud of, Coding at the Beach. That's where we've worked with Kentuckiana Works to provide coding instruction to young men who reside in the zones of hope in our community, and also many of them are students at Ballard High School. They will be working this summer as through a program with Kentuckiana Works, where they will actually be working on HTML websites and applications for businesses throughout the community, and they will be receiving a stipend over the summer, so we're very proud of that. And our third program is our community schools program. Each of our 7 community schools, which is a partnership with JCPS and Metro Government, will be open this summer, providing activities and quality instruction for our students. If we talk about closing the opportunity gap, what are we doing? We're trying to increase access to quality programming, equitable access. We're looking at a new community school at Carruthers Middle School. We're actively involved with the Blocks Initiative, which is an out-of-school time organization where we are a partner with Metro United Way and Metro Government. We are, Blocks is actually providing some summer learning grants, and we're aligning our curriculum and helping Vacation Bible School teachers throughout our community, through our faith partners, helping them to align their Vacation Bible School materials to our Common Core. So we're asking them to help us, to help them, help our students. Mr. Marshall?
Okay, so moving forward, and this group will tell you I always want to make sure that we can measure if we're doing something correct. So what we want to do is look at the programs and the summer activities that we have and see if they're really impacting change with our students. Some of the programs that we have started, you know, like coding at the beach, we don't really know other than that the kids are having a good experience in learning to code. What is that really going to do for college and career readiness? What is that really going to do for the career aspect of it? Because as it is set up, these kids can start coding now, and they're doing a lot of that stuff in their neighborhood. So we're going to, you know, look at the data and see if we can increase some of the programs. So when we come back to you next year and say we need this, there'll be some metrics to it that show that it has been successful. Lastly, I will not go through this. I think the big thing we need to understand is this is something that, as the governors of JCPS schools, some of this is preventable, and we need to look at what we can do, if you look at the video, to address the fact that we have 67% of our kids probably can't afford a lot of our summer camps. And we understand a lot of the camps that are out there, and we understand, based on the data and the research, that we're going to have to do something for kids over the summer. I like what Tamara said, the summer, we need to freeze the kids and don't let them melt. Well, it is our obligation to figure out more of what we can do with that. Understanding that we are a majority impoverished school district, and understanding that there's not access to a lot of the programs, the governing body, JCPS cabinet, we need to look at that and see what else we can do to move it forward. That ends our presentation. If there's any questions, we'll take them now.
Okay, are there questions or comments?
Well, do you have an idea of the cost involved here and how transportation is going to be taken care of for kids to make sure that they're in, and what your attendance expectations are for them in order for this to have an impact?
We are able to provide transportation for our literacy and chess program, and that's because we are serving many of our homeless students at one of our centers where we're providing literacy and chess. So we're able to provide transportation there. With our other 2 literacy and chess programs, we're doing them in the Zones of Hope. We're doing at Rangeland Elementary and at Phyllis Wheatley. And primarily those students live in the neighborhood, and their parents will be able to get them there. So we've thought about transportation being an obstacle and tried to prevent that hurdle from being a hurdle and keeping students from getting to the program.
Okay. Chuck?
I'm curious, I see some of these are established relationships, so I'm curious, somebody hearing about this and wants to pick up the mantra and free students, how does an organization propose a summer learning opportunity and try to engage in at least some discussion about a possible partnership with JCPS from this point going forward?
Normally that comes through Mr. Marshall's office, and they'll ask to have a meeting, and then we'll sit down with them and sort of get an idea of what they want to do and how they propose to do it, and then we'll sort of go from there, developing that relationship and seeing what we can do and how we can make it work.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Chris?
A couple of things. You mentioned that there's a new community school at Carruthers Middle. Can you kind of go into a little bit of detail what activities will be offered at that particular school?
We're in the process of getting that school set up. We're in the process of getting a coordinator in place. That's part of the partnership with the community school program. The district pays half of the salary for a community school coordinator, actually a community liaison, and Metro government pays the other half. Once we have that person in place, what a community school is all about is responding to what the community needs are. And so it's going to be that person's responsibility to work within the community, working within the school, working with families, working with those that don't necessarily have someone that's in the school district, may not have children or grandchildren yet, but we want them invested in the school district as well. So once we get that person in place and we discover what the needs are, then we'll start planning and working to meet those needs and with activities and other programming.
Okay, and my other question really kind of deals with marketing. How do we let all of these folks know about not only the services that we're offering here, but I also know that the city of Louisville is looking at re-engaging their cultural pass, which they offered last year, and I assume we're going to be plugging into that. If we're going to market our services to obviously to our students through newsletters and whatnot, we'll be able to also push that cultural pass out there as part of that marketing push, because I know that's something, especially in the video that you just showed, that a lot of middle class families have a chance to be able to take their kids to museums and whatnot, and this cultural pass is exactly that.
That's exactly right.
So I was wondering if you could speak to that just a little bit as far as marketing and getting all that out.
Well, our biggest marketing tool that we have for our out-of-school time providers, and particularly our summer programs, is the LouisvilleLearningPlaces.com. And parents can go there, put in their address, and find a learning place or a summer opportunity that's close to them. We talked about transportation, so they can find a place that's close to them. And our cultural enrichment agencies are also there. So that would be an opportunity for us to put on about the cultural passes, because as you know, this year the cultural pass has totally changed, and no longer can our OST providers take groups of children as they did last year. They're requiring that it be a family that goes with the pass. So now we've sort of got to change the way we push those passes out to ensure that families take their children, because so many of our students got the opportunity last year by going as a group through their out-of-school time provider.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Steph?
Do we have any schools that are year-round schools? Like we're a district of innovation. Do we have any?
We don't have year-round schools. Summer Boost actually would be a program that provides for summer, weeks of summer, but not entire summers.
Is there like any movement within your group to try to advocate to try an innovative school that would go year-round like they do in Southern Indiana?
We don't, with the community schools program, it is a year-round program as far as it's open during the school year as well as during the summer. So it operates year-round. I would defer to Mr. Marshall as to whether there's been conversations about it. Are you talking about an academic year-round?
Well, just we're a district of innovation. It seems like wanting to freeze this drain in the summer would logically lead you to an advocacy to try at least one year-round school. Is there any movement in that regard, or?
Dr. Hensley and I have talked about that at length, and we're trying to figure out, well, not trying to figure out, we're considering rolling out this plan. If Dr. Hensley would say, he would say when school ends Friday on the last day of school, it picks back up Monday for particular schools. And we need to look at financing that and figuring out how we can do that for particular schools. Not all children need to stay the extra 2 or 3 weeks.
Just, School of Innovation.
So it has been discussed, and one of the things that we will review for this time next year is how could we potentially do that, in what schools or in what quadrants of the
Can you report back on that maybe sooner than this time next year? Because you'd have to plan it.
Yes, absolutely.
So that'd be great.
Okay, I just have one question. My understanding is that we feel like we've gotten some benefit out of teaching parents and families about kindergarten readiness and what the definition is and how to help their very young children get ready to come to school for the first time. What are we doing related to summer learning loss to educate students and families about, you know, what they need to do themselves to keep their minds engaged over the summer.
So I'll speak to that first, and then maybe Dr. Gold wants to chime in. One of the things we've done inside the Zones of Hope, which is something that's coming out of the mayor's office, is we have these Zones of Hope meetings monthly, and we speak to the, especially around this season of the year, we speak to the importance of summer slump, and we hand out, we don't have it in front of us, we hand out programs that JCPS is offering to do that. That same video that you have seen, some of the parents have seen in particular zones, to talk about how the learning can't stop. If you, well, we all follow Dr. Hargan. She just tweeted the same flyer that we're handing out about this importance, because again, as we understand, if you do not have access to some of these programs, you need to know where programs are that are free so you can get to them. I have maintained, and it drives Melissa nuts, we need to even do more and more and just keep saying that we have to get this out there, and she agrees, because access is very important. And you know, my daughters will be at all these highfalutin summer camps, but my daughter's best friend will not unless we end up paying for it. So we have to figure out how to address that and make sure all students have access to all programs.
We work very closely with the PTA and with the Title I Parent Advisory Council, so they get the same types of information, and we talk about the summer slump, and we provide them with information that they send out to their membership. So that's how we work with parents in getting that out. We're also actively involved with the parent leadership organization that goes through the Urban League, and we have talked to them about giving this information to their parents, and parents get the information about the learningplaces.com.
Okay, Linda?
Dr. Harkins, last summer we had incoming 6th graders who spent time at Frost, and we had incoming Valley, I think 6th grade, or not 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade. We had something for them, didn't we, in summer? Are we continuing to do that, or did that stop?
Well, and no, actually, schools are doing some of it, in Section 7 money that we talked about in the tentative budget can be used to do that as well. So, so expanding learning is what people are trying to do with, or what schools are trying to do with their money, because it's because they recognize the value of it.
Well, is that being repeated though at Frost? Because I think that's what
we'll have to check specifically at Frost, but. I would hope so, but we can check specifically.
All right, thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to accept this report? Mr. Brady moves, Dr. Wilner seconds, all in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Now we move on to the consent calendar. There are no tie bids this evening. Dr. Harkins has recommended the consent calendar. Are there any items that board members want to pull down? Mr. Brady.
Item 8P.3, the acceptance of grant from Norton Healthcare for activities and athletics.
Okay. Any others? Yes, Lisa.
8R.
8R, okay. Linda?
I want O and R.
O and R. Okay. Anybody else? All right, let's start with O. Linda?
Well, just a question about our school activity funds. And I just want to check that number again. It says what we have left in the balances. I wrote down 2.98 million in the balances from our activity funds. I thought it was more than that. Did I read that wrong, or is that correct? 2.98 million in our, we're carrying, I guess they start with
right.
those balances.
Last year, the balances, if I remember, were around 8 to 9 million.
Yeah.
What this format is, the beginning balance is what they expect the ending balance to be this year. So I don't have anything to actually confirm their numbers. The schools actually sent to me the details of each of their clubs, but you know, for your sake, we put a summary together.
Yeah.
And then the expected revenues that they get this coming year and expenditures to then come to an ending balance. Typically, the activity accounts have ran anywhere from 7 million to 10 million.
That's what I thought. I was under the impression it was a lot more than that, but this is just as of a certain time?
Yes.
That's what was in there?
Right.
Okay, and, all right, and they don't have any obligation to spend their money on the students that they have right now? It's, they can save it up and
For
use it.
for some of it, it depends upon what the particular program is. Like incoming ninth graders, they may start a program to collect funds for their senior prom. So obviously those monies are going to continue to carry over. Say the baseball team, they may be collecting monies throughout the year, but they're going to spend most of it maybe in the summer, that type of thing. So there is an overlap as far as when it is earned. Majority of the money would be used for the students that are in that school at that time, but it could also be that there are some students that have participated in the programs and have been able to help with the fundraising, that then they decide either they move or they decide to go to another school, but their funds stay typically with that school where they earned it.
All righty, thank you, Cordelia.
Okay, Chris, P3, Norton Healthcare Grant, you're recusing?
Yes, Norton Healthcare is my employer, and I want to avoid any issue of impropriety, so I'm going to ask that we vote on this item separately, so I can abstain from voting.
Good, thank you. Lisa?
Okay, well, first of all, I'll ask that we vote on it separately. This has to do with the find my place. The Code of Acceptable Behavior and Discipline and the Student Bill of Rights. This is the first time I've called anything down from the consent calendar, and I promise not to make a habit of it. So there were a couple of things about this that I was concerned about right off the bat. So a couple of small specific things, which I'll mention first, and then that led me to some larger overarching kinds of issues. So the first is we've seen that there are huge discrepancies in how discipline policies are handled school to school. And so I think some of that is in the language that can very easily, maybe very easily be fixed. One, it says that school discipline policies must be consistent with district policy. And I think that there are different ways that that must be consistent or interpreted. We heard in a work session earlier that there's an appeals process, but I know personally of some parents who were never directed to that particular appeals process. So that's problematic, first of all. Second of all, another specific concern is that teachers, school administrators, and then district administrators are allowed to place temporary restrictions, but temporary isn't defined. And so temporary in some schools is defined as till the end of the week, and in other schools it's apparently interpreted as the entire school year. And so it seems to me that the board might want to address those changes so that we can have some consistency. So then as I started going through the policy and kind of in a sort of redlining kind of mindset, what other kinds of things were there. What came to my consciousness, I guess, was that I don't really think it's a very good policy. I think that we want all of our, every policy needs to be in the interest of improving school achievement. And we have to have very, very high standards of behavior in our schools so that all students have the opportunity to achieve. So I've kind of written a dissertation here. I promise I won't read the whole thing, but I do need to refer to my notes. So ultimately, the goal of a code of conduct should be to improve behavior so that teaching and learning can take place for the benefit of every student. And so a question I have is, what evidence do we have that our current code is having a positive effect on student behavior and student achievement? So I've looked for and I've asked around and not been able to find evidence of reduction in misbehavior. I don't know where that evidence is. We do know that we have increased suspension rates with huge racial disparities. We even have suspension of kindergartners. And this is even with many administrators acknowledging that there's pressure not to suspend, so they're reluctant to do so. They're keeping kids in the schools who sometimes really probably should be suspended in some cases, but even then our suspension rates are going up. As far as I've been able to tell, non-suspension discipline referral data isn't readily available. Anecdotally, we do know that many classrooms and many of our schools are met with behavior challenges on a daily basis that are disruptive to the learning process. We know also that many students are receiving suspensions and disciplinary referrals over and over again, sometimes upwards of 20 placements to different facilities within a school year. So that seems like a pretty strong bit of evidence that behavior isn't improving. So a quick summary of, I hope it's quick, of my concerns about the current code of conduct. The first is that it does not seem to be grounded in sound behavioral research. It's out of step with current literature and behavior change, for example, social skills training, as well as developmental brain science. The current code is focused on management of student behavior, which is an adult-focused activity that doesn't promote lasting change, rather than the development of knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary for self-regulation and self-discipline, which is child-centered and then benefits these children for the rest of their lives, and also benefits the classmates when children who are chronically disruptive can learn to self-regulate. Everyone benefits. So one is not based in research. The second is not based in best practices and not current with what successful districts are doing, including some of our benchmark districts. If we look at Pinellas County, Baltimore County, Charlotte and Mecklenburg County codes for comparison, they are very, very different. These are much more progressive codes of behavior. They're strengths-based rather than deficit-based models. They're focused on social and emotional learning integrated into the curriculum, welcoming practices, whole school restorative practices, character education explicitly, not that all of these are doing all of those things, but that they're focused on these much more positive kinds of approaches. So the third is that intensity levels are not addressed in our current code. We have terms such as deliberate disruption, failure to obey, disruptive behavior, and these are really murky terms and really subjective terms. So in our current code, there's absolutely no delineation between a student who a teacher interprets as having a defiant look on their face, right, as opposed to a child who's completely out of control. So I think we really need to clarify, define, and delineate those terms. A fourth issue is accountability, that we currently don't have a system in place for determining how teachers and administrators are applying the code. We do know that there are tremendous disparities from school to school in how the behavior code is used, how infractions are coded to get to widely inconsistent outcomes. And these widely inconsistent outcomes are disproportionately targeting low socioeconomic and minority students, particularly black male students. Fifth, so if we're serious about improving behavior, we need a comprehensive training component that needs to be embraced district-wide, school-wide, and we have to have that commitment. Sixth, if we examine data from the equity scorecard, it looks like, again, I've already said this, I think that the current code is having a disproportionately negative effect on students of color. And then finally, I believe that for our district to have a code for improving student behavior, and again, that should be the focus, improving behavioral outcomes so that all students can have better opportunities for learning. That has to be really rooted in a strong ethical foundation, and I don't really see that piece as part of our code. I see it, what I hear is, oh, it's expensive, so I hear that budget is a concern, and that, well, teachers don't really want to teach, positive discipline, which, these are just the things I hear, or it's parents' fault. There's sort of lots of reasons why we say we can't do it, but we don't really have a clear ethical system in place. And so finally, that brings me to my, I said finally before, but this is really finally. As a psychologist, I am bound by and I'm committed to the American Psychological Association Ethical Principles of Psychologists. And so one of the things that our ethical code talks about, here's a direct quote, this is conflicts between ethics and organizational demands. So if the demands of an organization with which psychologists are affiliated are in conflict with the ethics code, psychologists clarify the nature of the conflict, make known their commitment to the ethics code, and take reasonable steps to resolve the conflict. So that's what I'm trying to do now, is to make clear that for me this really is a conflict. The particular standard in my ethics code, the first one I read is 1.03, the other is 3.01, which has to do with unfair discrimination. Psychologists do not engage in unfair discrimination based on a whole list of things, but I've specifically highlighted race and socioeconomic status, since these are the kids who are being so disproportionately poorly served by the code of conduct. So to resolve the conflict, I guess I would ask this board that we work toward a policy that does not have a disproportionately adverse effect on students from poverty and on students of color, that we work toward a code that has ethical underpinnings, and that we work toward a code that is really focused on improving student behavior and not just punishing misbehavior.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wilner. Would you guys like to comment?
Well, I was just going to say that I don't disagree with basically everything you said, and I appreciate it. I respect your passion. And I think we're all about trying to improve student behavior now, and we realize that the punitive answer isn't going to fix things. We know it's like when Chief Conrad says we're not going to wrest our way out of the problems in our community. We're not going to suspend our way out. We know this, but I think I was here tonight for the updates, just the changes in addresses and things. So this is getting pretty deep. But if we decide to go this route, I believe, and Rosemary knows, there's a board policy. We have to have a committee and all these, and it's not a bad thing. It's a great goal, and we need to work for that. But my concern would be getting all this done and in place prior to the start of school, August 12th.
Let me just take you back in time. Last year, because this was approved on June 10th, can you both estimate the number of hours of a community committee spent to get us to the point of approval on June 10th?
It was, Board Member Duncan was there. There was a lot of Friday mornings. It was at times, because everybody's passionate about this, it was contentious, and it could get ugly, but we got a lot of good work in, so I would say it was a lot of hours. I expected a golden award. I didn't get it, and I'm just kidding. Well, it was a lot of hours.
I guess what I want to emphasize here is how complex this is.
It is.
And moving this code forward from where it was to where it is now. And what we're talking about is where it can be. Our process has been, because we train on the code, and it really isn't the code that is disproportionate, it's the application of the code that results in disproportionality. So training was done last summer to all of the people who apply the code to make sure that they were applying it fairly. Dr. Hensley's not here, but there's been a lot of effort by Dr. Averett and that staff in terms of positive behavior intervention support to train schools about how to do things positively. So this is definitely a journey, but it's only been application for 1 year, and we're seeing decreases in exclusions. We're seeing more positive, and we're not where we need to be. No one is here Mr. Westman and John would say the same thing, is we're not where we need to be, where we want to be, but we're on a journey that will take time, and convening a committee for next year to push us further along. And what we need to do is implement positive behavior intervention support with Fidelity, student response teams with Fidelity, and continue to bring back progress to the board, because we went from a very punitive code of conduct to one that's more
we call it corrective strategies.
corrective strategies. That's a good term, but it's a journey. So so that is, and what Jackie said is that for this, they did editorial, like changing names or whatever to make sure it was current, but they didn't make changes, substantive changes, because it was just approved a year ago. So
and one of the changes you mentioned, the temporary restriction of school activities, which is so varied. We really couldn't get into that unless it went to a committee. That would be a big change. So these were mostly just, as Dr. Hargan said, addresses, titles, and verbiage that JCPS has adopted.
And you found over the weekend there were some that you missed?
Yes.
So how many were missed, just so that the board has the accurate document?
I have to admit. It was about 5 or 6 addresses and some titles in the back, and especially with the index and then the page numbers matching up, so I had to redo it. I've got the updated version here with the one-sheeter showing you where the changes are.
Can you just make sure that the board has it?
Yes.
So
You want me to pass them out, or do you?
We can get them afterwards.
Okay.
But you're really saying conforming changes. There's no
Yes.
editorial discretion. There's no substance in here is the point, right?
Yes, sir. But the one other thing is the dropout age. It used to be, for instance, parents and students would have to fill out a dropout form. That's no longer the case because of the new law. So that was deleted. There were some deletions that aren't, in use anymore. So
Because
we
of
did
the
have that.
change in the law that.
And the change in the dropout law was added to our attendance policy.
Okay. All right. Chris, you had your hand up. Then
Hang
Steph,
on.
then Linda.
Before I take my turn, I know that Member Wilner is really kind of chomping at the bit to follow up on here, so I'm okay for her going first.
Okay, but you gotta make it real short.
I will. Well, I'll just say that I've not seen any research basis behind SRTs. And the other thing that I hear you saying, exclusion from class is going down, but I'm also hearing that when students are referred to positive action centers, that's not necessarily reported. So there may be underreporting of exclusions from class.
Okay. So Chris.
Just to be clear on a couple of issues. One, we review this every 2 years, correct? So we're 1 year in. So we're going to be looking at this in a much more detailed way, like you mentioned, reconvening a committee next year so we can address some of these issues. And I also share Dr. Wilner's issue or concern about the temporary language in there. I know that I've already had some parents run up against that for some discipline issues with some of my schools. So that is a concern that's out there. So I know that we'll be addressing that soon.
Yes.
But I understand the limitations of what we're dealing with here. So just wanted to draw that out so there's some clarification that we'll be able to at least address some of these issues next year. Thank you.
Okay. Steph?
To clarify, I know that at one of the past board meetings, we voted to not have a board member sit on the committee. Is that correct?
We didn't vote, I don't believe. I don't think we voted.
I don't think we did.
Is a board member going to sit on the committee?
The committee is currently in abeyance.
Correct.
Right? I mean, that's the status right now. We completed the work of updating this core policy and most of the policies, and we've got we've got the working groups underway and the strategy thread underway through September. So the idea is that we will take up we'll reformulate the committees to do this work and the next wave of work after we finish the planning stuff.
Okay,
All
understand.
right, yeah,
So it was just like for this year.
Yeah, no, it's not there's no permanent change. It's
Yeah.
just we had to get the
And then I
planning
guess,
stuff done.
I'm trending today because I really, just like with the budget, I am just really eager for, if you don't think, like you just said, you agreed like 100% with Dr. Wilner, why, what happened between now and last year? Why are we looking at this document? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
If you want a new paradigm, you guys are management. You're the ones who are supposed to bring us a good budget, a budget that is different. I know the current budget was developed before Lisa and I were sitting on the board. It was started way back. But this is the same thing, you know what I mean? So I hear you that it's going to take this year. So I guess this year in 15-16 is when we'll hopefully be sitting in a different position than we are right now looking at this document. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I agree. I would just say that we did make an awful lot of changes in the right direction.
Yeah, and it's just progressive change.
And we need to continue to
But I
look
think
for improvement.
it might be useful for Linda to comment a little bit on the committee process, because, I mean, one of the things that's missing from this dialogue is we have a lot of talk about the importance of community contribution. There was a lot of community input to the document that you have, and if we think that when we get all the community input we're going to move in a progressive direction without interruption, that might not be 100% accurate. You want to tell us what actually happened?
Well, last year, you know, according to board policy, we have a code of conduct committee. Now, that's one of your things that you're supposed to have. And it tells the composition of the committee, and one of the members is supposed to be a member of the Board of Education. But we spent several months last year revising what we have, and unfortunately kids still fight, they still assault each other, they still bring drugs to school, they still bring weapons to school, they still do things that it's difficult to have them continue to be in school without recognizing the seriousness of the offense. So we're not really preparing them for reality if they think they can do some of these things and there is no consequence. So we have to balance constantly what we think are appropriate consequences. Assistant principals out there who have to keep order in the buildings along with the principals have to have documents that they can follow and have to be based on the law. And Rosemary sits in on this committee, and she makes sure that everything is based in some legal background or some law. We're very careful about making sure that those things are followed. But unfortunately, we do have students who commit crimes at school, on the bus, on their way, when they get off the bus, on their way to school. We have that, and so we have to have these guidelines for those administrators who have to deal with these issues. You want your child safe in school. Everybody wants his or her child safe in school. So we have to have consistency in terms of what we will or the consequences that behavior will meet. But we really have tried to eliminate the suspensions in softer areas and soft offenses, what we call soft offenses, and tried to do other things, alternative things with that. But fights, and you know, you mentioned disproportionality. We looked at data last year. We had fights reported from our populations. Our top two groups, African Americans, had 2.5 times the number of fights recorded as our white population. And so consequently, it looks like 2.5 times as many suspensions, and it looks like disproportionality. But you also have to remember these suspensions are based on actions. Now, what we want to make sure in the training process is that everybody calls a fight a fight. Calls what is a true fight a fight, and they don't call something else a fight. You know, that's what we have to be consistent in, and that's what we ran into, where sometimes administrators would call something an assault, and in another school they would not call it an assault. Somebody else would not call it an assault. And so we're coding things, and we have to do a safety report at the end of the year, and these things are coded a certain way, and your school is labeled whether it's a safe school or not safe based on that coding. So a lot of times coding of offenses determines what your school is judged to be. So we have to be consistent in that coding part. But things that bothered me in this are not the same things that were bothering Lisa. And I would say that next year when we convene a revision or look to revise this, then that kind of input can be included. into what we do. I mean, our addition of restorative practices and in circumstances, I think, was a big step forward for us, and trainings that our administrators had. Things that I mean, for me, Jackie, it was a matter of just catching all the things that have to be updated, because I was reading it as like a parent, and so we were inconsistent in calling you the Director of Student Relations and you the Director of Due Process. It was inconsistent. You know, I'm sure you saw several times in there where we didn't get those revisions made. Alternatives placement, you know, where we tried to do success pathways rather than alternative placement, but yet alternative placement kept popping up in there, and I didn't read the entire document from front to back like I normally do, but I just kept popping into those things. John, there's one section that had John in the land building. Well, I didn't know if he is in the land building now. Maybe you moved to the land building. Are you there?
No, I'm third floor still.
Okay, so
I corrected that.
I saw that in you know, I just kept running into those kind of things, and I thought, oh my goodness, if a parent looks at this in the appeals process, who to appeal to? It goes to, you know, all of a sudden we were back into old language. We were switching back and forth in the language. So that was what caught my attention. One thing that also caught my attention, I want to ask you about, is the 45-day temporary placement of an ECE student, where it says an ECE student may be placed in a success pathway for 45 days, up to 45 days before the decision to return to school. And I don't remember reading that in this before. And you know, maybe it happened and I just missed it, but is that new, or was that what there last year?
That was in there last year. That's an ECE piece. So for the 45-day thing applies only to ECE students.
So where would they go in a success pathway for 45 days?
Well, depending on the art committee's decision, it might be Phoenix, it could be Liberty School, it could be a Jefferson County High School spot, it could be whatever the committee feels like would be best for that kid educationally.
But see, it's not really stated that fully in there, so it almost sounds like it's...
Linda, let me make a suggestion. That's not a change. I mean, I think the only thing that we're being asked to review right now is the changes in the language, and I mean, I think you and Lisa and Steph have all made good points about, I'd say, the philosophy, and I think you've also made a point that I agree with strongly about the importance of consistency in the application of the words that are in here, and the need to improve on that. I guess I'd suggest if you have changes to critique, do that, and then let's talk for a minute about how to work this into our planning cycle, because we do have to, we need to create a forum for the philosophical differences to be expressed, and to work through it so that we can improve going forward.
Well, see, here was my dilemma. If I had just said nothing, this would have been approved, and parents would have been handed something that would have been all having a lot of things that were confusing.
Right.
It will be very confusing. So I'm not asking for anything other than that what we be given have these kind of changes so that it is clear, and we're not using old language, new language, and so that a parent can follow, like in the appeals process, a parent can follow what it's supposed to be. I had a question about the Assistant Director of Due Process. Is that a new position?
It's the Assistant Director of Student Relations still, like is reflected in the org chart, and I'm the Director of Student Due Process.
Right. But the Assistant Director of
Student Relations, and that's been corrected in here also. Yes.
Okay, all right, we got it. And then
especially in the appeal process, it's perfect now.
Just one more thing. It says trafficking or drug distribution may result in success pathways. Did you take a look at that so that I don't know whether we want to say it that way or not. So, I mean, did you?
Well, success pathways include the restorative academies, so we're including the Basham Manor Lane and Breckenridge.
Well, it
if
wasn't
it's-
written like that, so I'm just hoping that the way it's written allows a parent to understand that there is a consequence, because the way it was written, it doesn't sound like a consequence. Trafficking and drug distribution may result in successful pathways. You know, that just didn't hit me as making sense to a parent when they look at it. So those are the things that were troubling to me, and I just want to have some kind of assurance that those kinds of things have been cleaned up, so that we, you know, when we approve this, it's not going to go to the printer with all that in it, so that parents get confused.
Do we have any kind of process for reviewing our published documents and putting them into consumer-friendly language so that it is actually possible for parents and students to understand them? Because I think, Linda, that's really what your criticism is that the document is not consistently edited and drafted so that it can be understood, right?
Well, yeah, it was all the new changes that we had to make, you know, that we have approved, and then they had to go back and do so much revision in this for all those new labels and new names.
Right.
That, you know, and I know everybody has time challenges to do that, but that was the part that was troubling me, because I didn't want to say yes to this with all those
But Jackie,
errors.
you went through this again over the weekend.
Yes.
And caught all the errors that Ms. Duncan had pointed out.
Especially the ones she specifically just mentioned. The Assistant Director of Student Relations and the addresses. The Chief Equity Officer, I had him at Land Building, and that should have been Van Hoos. So they've all been corrected, and it's here.
And it's somewhere explained that a success pathway may be a permanent placement, because I didn't see that.
Well, it's
a success
still-
pathway may be a permanent placement, depending on the recommendation of the committee. I didn't see that.
Nothing has been changed as far as if a student gets assigned to Breckenridge or one of the other restorative academy on Basher Manor, that they're released. I mean, if it's a gun, it will still be a year. None of that has changed.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have to separate the consent agenda into 3 votes. The first will be on everything except item P3 and item R, each of which will be voted on separately. That's what we've got? So is there a motion to accept the consent agenda with the exception of P3 and R? Mr. Brady moves. Is there a second? Okay, Ms. Horn, all in favor? Aye. Okay, that carries. Second, this is on item P3, acceptance of a grant from Norton Healthcare for activities and athletics. Is there a motion to accept this? Mr. Hadaway and Dr. Wilner, all in favor? Aye. And Mr. Brady abstains. Okay, great, thank you. And then third is on item R, the approval of proposed 2016 Code of Acceptable Behavior and Discipline. Is there a motion to accept? Okay, Ms. Duncan moves it. A second? Mr. Hadaway, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Wilner and Horn. Okay, thank you. That carries. Thank you. Okay, we're now on to board reports, requests, and planning calendar. Let's first look at the planning calendar. Is there any comment or question about that before we get in? Mr. Hadaway.
I'm not sure I'm in the right place. The JCPS retirement dinner that is coming up on June 9th. In the future, can we look to, I don't know who schedules that or anything, but I miss it every year because of a graduation. So I would like to go one time, and if we could just look at that, scheduling it around graduations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments about the planning calendar? Linda?
Oh, I think at some point we need to have on there an explanation for the plan for 16 and 17-year-olds because we're going to have 18 and 15 and 16. We're going to have 18 as the age where they have to stay. So we're going to be pulling back in 16 and 17-year-olds. And I just think we need to kind of hear that discussion about that. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know if there is a plan for transitioning to outsourcing our legal services, or if that's a simple explanation, but it may be just a simple explanation, but I don't know if we have a plan for transitioning.
We have a request for proposal out there, and we're getting proposals in, so we're using the bid process. So once a firm is selected, we'll come up with a transition plan.
Okay.
Okay, others on the planning calendar? Okay, then let's vote to receive the planning calendar, and then we'll go to discussions. There are no speakers, so the board members' reports will be the last item. So is there a motion to accept the planning calendar? Okay, Chris moves, Linda seconds. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. Okay, so are there board member reports, requests, and other things? Chris?
Just real quickly, I'd like to send thank yous to Hilliard Lions for the Excellence Awards. We had the opportunity to attend that awards banquet once again this year, and Jim Allen and his group did a very excellent job of honoring a lot of our teachers and the great work that they do in our schools. I also want to thank GLI and the business leaders for education, that subgroup, for putting on the one-year anniversary of the audit. That was a really great event. Dr. Hargens and Chair Jones, along with Auditor Evelyn and Roger, I'm sorry, what's Roger's last name? Thank you. Roger Cude from Humana were a part of that panel, and that was a really great discussion, and Kent Euler also emceed it, which is really, really nice. I also want to say thank you to Junior Achievement for hosting our retreat. We had a really wonderful retreat and very productive. And Junior Achievement, yes, we own the building, but still, I want to say thank you to them anyway, because they were very kind enough to staff that and welcome us in. Just to report out on the Technology and Performance Work Group, we did meet since the last board meeting, and we'll be meeting again, I believe, on June 15th. Is that correct? Trying to juggle all my calendars here. So we were discussing some of the brainstorming ideas, and we're looking to formulate that and formulate a plan to move forward and eventually come up to the board with some suggestions. Last, I do want to address an issue that happened within my district, and that's where one of my elementary schools had to suddenly cancel a field trip at the last moment. I just want everyone to understand that the issue was that a form wasn't submitted to the board for approval. Just want everyone to know that that is a state regulation, that is a state law, that those items have to come before the board. It's something that I feel is a bit arcane, and I would love for that to be able to delegate that to the superintendent and her staff. But unfortunately, that is a state regulation. I will say that in extenuating circumstances, the superintendent can approve that, and I wish a phone call had been made, but not everybody knows that. And there's
I'm
lots
up
of
at 4:30 a.m.
You're up all the time. You don't sleep. So, but obviously, I mean, we have a lot of board policies, and it's impossible to memorize them all. So I understand that, but just want to let everyone know that that is a state reg that we would gladly delegate, or at least this board member would, if we could. So just want to put some context behind that. Outside of that, thank you very much.
Okay, Chuck, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I want to echo what Dr. Hargan said earlier in her superintendent report. Appreciate the comments you said about DOS. I want to say congratulations to Principal Ken Moeller and DOS, who won was one of the grand prize winners of the Lead to Feed World Hunger Leadership Challenge. Principal Moeller put 3 DOSSome events together, and their goal was to raise $500, but they ended up raising $2,000 for Kentucky Refugee Ministries. And so, because of their good efforts, they were one of the grand prize winners. As the superintendent shared, 25 will be given to their charity, which is KRM, and 20,000 goes to DOS for Apple products. And I know they will put that to very good use. So congratulations to DOS.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, because it affects my district so much, we had a meeting at South Central Neighborhood Place the other day, the South Central Advisory Council and the South Jefferson Advisory Council, because the mayor has recommended, and I think it's already been signed off on, that they close the WIC services there at both those sites, which hits my district hard, Iroquois and Fairdale area. And the proposal is for them to find transportation over to Dixie, and transportation with taking your kids sometimes and not always having an automobile, it's puts a hardship on us. And we were trying to, at the meeting, trying to come up with alternatives for just closing both sites, and maybe having one site open a couple days and one site open another couple days or 3 days, and alternating that. It's just a blow to my district, and not very happy with so far the plan. Hope we can come up with a better one.
Seth?
It's going to be a busy week for me. We have the Norton Commons boundaries being the revealed. It's a draft boundary that'll be at Chansey tomorrow night at 7. And then on Thursday at 7 at Westport Middle, they're going to have the planning, the fourth and not final, because I think there's 2 other meetings, but this will be at Westport, so it should be a good group there, so I encourage everybody to attend. We had some great news. Justin, I brought him to your attention. He is at the Bridge, one of our Youth Service Center coordinators. He is part-time there and also at Coleridge Taylor, but he won one of those awards at the event, the Hilliard Lions event, so we are very proud of him in our district. He contributes so much to our children. And also I attended a Euspiritus event. It was fabulous. Euspiritus is one of the schools, Bellwood Euspiritus in my district, but they had an event. It was very well attended and we were represented there. And also today just had a delightful visit at Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor spent my whole morning there took a tour with some gals at the PTA. They have a very small but active PTA, and it is a wonderful, strong principal. We serve a population of 70% of the kiddos we love them. They come a long way to us, and we serve them well. I felt very confident in Mr. Roberts' staff, and teachers were very experienced. There are major challenges. We have about 30% now of the local resides, the neighborhood folks going to the school. So it's set up originally as more of a community school, but it's become, and which is just so wonderful, a mission for educating everybody. And so in that effort, we just would like to, again, lead a voice to the equity issue of having, such a population served with only part-time resource, support. Would really like to see many more resources, and I feel like we are getting them, which I'm really encouraged, but just want to lift it up as, there are some choices here that we are making. We have a school nearby, Wilder, that also has a lesser resides area, about 47%. So you're talking about 183 kids at Wilder that are local, and you're talking about 183 kids too at Zachary Taylor. So there's just some interesting decisions, that can be made. We will serve the children that we have, and I do feel that we do it really well in District 3, and we are embracing it, but we do need to be supported in that effort.
You want to say anything?
The board retreat was May 15th and 16th, and I just want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity that we had to spend some time together and talk about education and our commitment to the kids in a deeper and more substantive way than we ordinarily have the opportunity to do. Ed Cordes from Center for Nonprofit Excellence, I thought, did a great job. Thanks to Jonathan for organizing things and getting him there. And it was, I thought, really wonderful to have Ed's assessment of this group is that there's, clearly every one of us, we come from different perspectives and have different ideas and different strengths and weaknesses probably too to bring, but that every one of us is in this for kids. And so I just want to say how much I appreciate my colleagues on the board and the superintendent. Let's see, I want to re-ask for a report on committees, how district committees work, and all the questions that were in my request from last time. We heard during our work session today on SBDMs that school committees bring policy recommendations to the SBDM, and I would love us to get to a point where district committees are bringing recommendations to this board. So I would love to see if that's how that happens currently, and if it's not happening currently, why not, I guess. The other question I have, and I just would like information when standardized tests that are not state or federally mandated, when they're added, does that, I just want to know how that happens, if that comes to the board for approval, just what the process is that for those standardized tests to be again added. And then the last request has to do with the Magnet Schools of America review. We had asked for a community-based task force, and now that that's moved into the academics shop, I would just really love to see what that new task force is going to look like and who will be on that.
Okay, thanks. I'll be brief. I want to thank Jonathan Lowe for the work that he has done with the strategic planning work, but also the board work groups. My sense is that each of the two currently active working groups are making a great deal of progress, and compliments on the meetings so far. The finance working group has been active in the background, I think has had a lot of learning. Thank you, Cordelia, for helping with that. And again, as we talked about in the work session earlier today, the finance question is largely, okay, now without that we know what the goals are, how much money do we need, and that's when that's going to really have to spring into action. But I think that's going well, and I want to thank the board members for the extraordinary amount of time that each of us is putting into all of these activities, which I think will be valuable. Just to sort of wrap tonight's meeting, I think if we start back at the strategy session working, work group, or work session at 5 o'clock, Ed called out the sort of big rocks that we had identified in our offsite and that were consistent coming from the community meetings that are underway. And I think, I'll use the wrong words, but one of them was personalization and, building schools supported by teacher training and, all the re-engineering and resources that we need to do so that the individual child can be addressed. I think when we fast forward to the discussion of the code of conduct, we're really talking about, I think, very similar things. And, it looks to me like what's going to come out of the strategy is, over the next 5 years, the district is going to need to adopt practices and to train people in how to execute them that will, deal with kids all along the spectrum, much more where they are, and help them get to where they're going, while all along maintaining safe, respectful places where people can do good work. So it's an enormous task. We've got a lot going on, but even though it seems sometimes like there's real inconsistency, I see threads that are sort of, they're moving along, and there's a lot of similarity in the way that they're wrapping together. So I do hope we'll be able to, pull off a good plan and then actually begin doing the hard part of executing it. I think that is all we have tonight. There are no speakers on non-agenda items. No executive session is needed. and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Brady moves, Mr. Jones seconds. All in favor? Aye.
I did. All I know is Ron had a free throw.